and welcome to Shop Franklin Supporting Small Business, where we raise awareness of and build community around our local, independently owned businesses every day. My name is Sarah Mabardi, and today I have Betsy Berry of Franklin Yoga and Wellness. Thanks for coming.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
I'm glad. So, Betsy, I wore these red pants because someone once told me, well, A, they're like the one pair of pants I own, but that red is your root chakra, foundation, core, balance, strength, grounding. So
good place to start.
I thought that was a great place to start. So I'm wearing my root chakra pants for you.
Thank you.
So
the
Betsy,
blue's going to open up the throat. This will be a nice conversation.
Good. See, you guys learned so much already. See, keep watching. So Betsy, we go back a while. I knew you before you owned Franklin Yoga and Wellness, and I'm so fortunate to have because you are such a beautiful soul. And I am so glad to have continued our friendship. And now you own Franklin Yoga and Wellness, which you owned for about 2 years?
Almost 3.
Almost 3. You can tell how often I do yoga. So tell me, how, from where you are, how did you come to own a yoga studio?
Well,
this is apparently a really good story.
I was actually dragged to my first yoga class, kicking and streaming. I really didn't want to be there. I thought, I've only got so much time to get to the gym. I want to get my workout, get in, get out. But a friend kept insisting that I really should try this yoga class that we had at our gym. And after the first class, I absolutely fell in love with it.
Now, what kind of yoga class was that?
It was a vinyasa flow.
Whatever that is. So, vinyasa flow class.
A vinyasa flow class, which links the movements of what you're doing to the breathing that you're doing. So it has a bit of a cardio edge to it.
Really?
Worked in perfect at a gym yoga class.
Okay.
But there was something about the way that you held the poses, the way that your body felt afterwards, that I thought, wow, this is something really different. I love this. And I just started practicing more and exploring more and decided very quickly that I wanted to start teaching. And had looked into different teacher training programs, found that one that worked for my schedule. I was a mom of 3 young kids at the time, and completed that. There was a yoga studio that was opening up on the other side of town around the same time. Reached out to them and started teaching there almost immediately, and I've been there ever since, and now own the studio.
Now, what is involved in becoming a yoga guru? Instructor, and how you learn all of the different poses, because it can be overwhelming. I've done yoga and I walk in and I always feel, I think this is true for any gym class or any exercise routine that you introduce yourself to, it's overwhelming to walk into a space and feel like you're the one that doesn't know what you're doing. And yoga, I've found, is a very welcoming environment to introduce yourself in general. Maybe because I've been to your yoga classes where you're very in tune with what I need. And most recently I went to your yoga class. It was a while ago. But at the end, she came over and put a blanket on me and an eye pillow on. And that was my favorite part.
Because that is the whole purpose for coming to a yoga class, is to have the full, complete relaxation at the end.
It was so nice.
And no matter how you approach your yoga, whether you come in through a gentle or a seated or a standing or an active or a cardio class, the whole point is to come to the place at the end where you feel fully grounded in your body, fully centered in your mind, and have your mind, spirit, and body completely in better connection.
That sounds lovely.
I know, right?
I should try that more often.
You should.
So tell me, so what's involved with the training? So you just went through all of the different aspects of yoga that you can approach it as. And it really is. It's a dynamic exercise. It's not just stretching. It's not, it's not, I should just say, it's not what a lot of people think it is. So
Absolutely.
you could say that a lot of people come into it with preconceived notions of what yoga is, but it really, there's a lot of different ways to approach it. There's Bikram yoga, which I believe is the hot yoga. There's Kundalini yoga, which is an entirely different experience, and that's what I used to practice. So how did you come to learn about these, and can you describe some of them for us?
Well, I think the most important thing to know is that everyone comes to yoga when they're ready, and you have to be a little bit of a seeker and explore to find what's the right style of yoga for you and your body and your lifestyle and where you are emotionally and mentally at this point in your life. When we're younger, we're usually drawn towards a more active style of yoga. When we're older, we start out usually with a much more gentle approach. Now, that doesn't mean that an older person can't handle a more active class. You just have to find a place to begin.
Mm-hmm.
There's a saying that the most difficult yoga pose that you'll ever do is the first step onto your yoga mat. And I do believe that's true. I think you have to get over your self-perceived limitations and just give it a try. And if that's not the right class or the right time or the right instructor or the right studio, then you explore a little bit deeper and find the thing that resonates with you the most.
Mm-hmm.
So different styles of yoga usually have a different approach and often with a slightly different end result. A Kundalini yoga practice works very dynamically through breath and through movement to move a lot of emotional energy.
Mm-hmm.
A vinyasa practice works focusing on controlling the breath and moving through a dynamic series of poses to have a very healing effect on the body. Bikram yoga, which you mentioned, is a specific style of hot yoga, there are many, which uses the same sequence of poses twice through every yoga class. Every class will go through the same series of poses. For some people that works. For other people it doesn't appeal to them because the heat doesn't work well for their body type, or they need a little bit more variety and change in each yoga class that they're going to experience. And I do find personally from my own journey, sometimes it just comes to resonating with a teacher that speaks the language that you need to hear.
I agree. I was speaking with someone recently and I said that everyone's attracted to what speaks to them, and someone is going to be attracted to something very different from someone else. So there's all these different classes and you're drawn to it. Maybe someone does vinyasa flow, and there's 5 different classes offered of vinyasa flow yoga, but there's a teacher that they're going to connect with, or there's someone that they very clearly don't connect with, and that's not the class for them because they're not going to reach that relaxation point that they need to. So not only the physical experience in yoga, but also that emotional connection or that feeling that you get from it.
Absolutely.
I think that's really important.
Absolutely. Well, you even know that as a mother, you may be trying to get one of your children to understand something, whether it's a rule of the house or how they're going to tie their shoes. And you can tell that child ad nauseum and he doesn't hear you. And then a babysitter, a grandparent might say what you're saying in a slightly different way, and the kid has an aha moment and can tie the shoes for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, that happens to me all the time.
I had a feeling.
Just maybe.
Right? But I think it's that way with yoga as well. Sometimes you just have another individual that is resonating with your spirit so clearly that the way that they speak connects with you in a way that it's a pleasant, enjoyable, enlightening experience that you then want to get a little more curious and go deeper, as opposed to begrudgingly packing your mat in your car and showing up for yet another workout.
So how amazing that that first class that you took, something was aligned in that class that it spoke to you.
Absolutely.
The location, the room, the instructor, the class.
And it's an instructor who now works at the studio with me now.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. So how did you come? I had asked, how did you come to own Franklin Yoga and Wellness?
Well, I've been teaching there for many years, and one of the things that the 2 owners at the time were Kundalini practitioners, which again is a very different style of yoga from what I teach.
And that was my experience of Franklin Yoga and Wellness. At the time, I was looking for something that would help me explore more spirituality and openness of heart and energy movement. And so I did the Kundalini practice, which is a very dynamic, interesting practice. And it can be very exertive and tiring. Often I had to stop halfway through, and that was okay. It was a safe place. Right. But that was my introduction to Franklin Yoga and Wellness, and I had gone there before. So they were primarily Kundalini, or Gurama.
Gurama and Kate
had taught the Kundalini class that I attended.
But what I immediately loved about the studio that they had opened and what was different about that studio was that immediately they understood the importance of hosting a multidisciplined studio. Meaning, there are different styles of yoga that believe they are the only style of yoga that you should be practicing. And there's many, kind of like religion. People get set in the way that they interpret a certain thing and feel it's the one true way. What I did appreciate with the Khalsas was that they could see that most people have to come when they're ready, and to hear a message that they're willing to hear. So different people will come to different styles of yoga for very different reasons. So they invited myself and a few other teachers that teach a hatha style of yoga, so it's a little bit more movement-based. We also do get into breath work, and we do get into some of the more dynamic and esoteric pieces of yoga, but in our own way. But what they did was they supported each of our growth, and from that, the studio, I believe, began to thrive because we were serving many different styles of people. For instance, if you hear hot yoga class, hot yoga studio, often it's the same type of people that are drawn to that studio, which is fine. All the power to that. But what I do appreciate about the studio that I was working at the time, and which I now own, and I've worked very hard to try to maintain that, is that I feel that the doors are open to anyone that walks in the door. So regardless of who walks in the door and at what time of day, there should be a teacher and a class that will resonate with them. And I feel that we have a well-trained staff that will make anyone walk in the door and feel welcome, whether it's the correct class for them that evening or not. They will guide them to the place that may likely make them feel more comfortable being on this path to yoga. For my own personal journey, what resonated with me was a vinyasa style of yoga because it gave me an awful lot of flexibility and creativity in the way that I sequence poses, so that I have a lot of control over how I can dynamically come in and help someone heal. I can come in from many different angles, or whether it's through the poses, through the breath work, through the sequencing, through whatever the focus is for the day, the week, the month, in order to help people heal hearts. Help people get through a difficult week where we've got a political situation in the background that's unpleasant, where we have news that is hitting many people and drawing them down energetically. So maybe the focus this week isn't going to be to come into a stronger back bend. We're not working with the physical poses, but we're using these physical poses in a way that we're helping people feel more balanced so that they're sleeping better at night, so that they're able to function in their everyday life, so they're not walking through Franklin, for instance, feeling down and depressed because the outside world is really challenging.
So, pun intended, it offers a lot of flexibility.
Nice. She's a natural yogi.
Really funny. Yeah, and that's, what draws me to the yogic experience with Franklin Yoga and Wellness specifically is that energy. For those of us who embrace the idea of energy and spirit and healing and karma, you feel it when you walk in. It is a safe, comforting, welcoming space where it's not just about that physical exercise. It's not, okay, I have to get to yoga today. It's, I want to go there. And no matter where you are physically, mentally, emotionally, you are going to embrace something that speaks to that part of you.
Absolutely.
And that was my experience there. And I think that's what differentiates you and the studio from just a yoga class or going to a general fitness facility that offers yoga. It's more of a community. And I think anyone in the ShopFranklin community will know that something that's very core to my being is collaboration, community, bringing people together in a positive and supportive environment.
Right.
And I think yoga and Franklin Yoga and Wellness really support that endeavor. So with that, with the idea of community, Franklin Yoga and Wellness works for the community. I know that you've done a yoga and wine pairing. No, I believe it was actually chakra and wine pairing. I was not able to attend.
Exactly.
You've done at least 2 of these, correct?
We've done 2 so far. I had been approached by Mark Lindsay of Franklin Liquors, and what he had suggested that we do is some type of a yoga and wine class. And my resistance to that was, I thought, well, great, it's just an excuse for a bunch of people to drink wine after a yoga class. And I'm certainly not against a decent glass of Cabernet.
And the problem with that is...
But the problem was that it wasn't in line with what I want to do with the studio, which is to help educate and bring people back into balance. But I thought any chance that I have to educate people on a deeper level, for instance, you mentioned the chakras. The chakras, we believe, from an energy standpoint, are large areas of almost like a ball or a sphere of energy that aligns the spine. Each of them have a particular purpose. And when the energy center is shut down, when you're depressed, when you're lonely, when you're sad, when you're grieving, for instance, your heart chakra energy might shut down. And not that you're going to completely collapse, but you might not be able to be as open and welcoming in your own home, in your own kitchen, as you normally would be. So through poses, through breathing, through meditation, through awareness, we have different ways to start to bring these energies back into balance.
It's almost like a dimness.
Bingo.
So if you're looking at the chakras and going through your chakras, and there's one that associates with different part of your being, so your heart chakra, there'll be a dimness there.
Right.
And there are yogic practices and breathing exercises and mental exercises, mindfulness, deliberate actions that can brighten that dimness.
Absolutely. That said, there's also ways where these chakra energies can become out of balance and overactive. For instance, someone with an overactive third chakra. So your third chakra is all about your will and your self-esteem and your power center and how you present dynamically into the world. So there might be one or two political candidates right now that you might, just saying might, consider might have an overactive third chakra.
And that's where balancing, creating that chakra balance.
Absolutely.
So brightening what needs brightening and moderating what might
bringing
be
in. Absolutely.
a little overexpressed.
Absolutely. And when these energies are in balance, we feel healthy, we feel secure, we feel loved, we feel dynamic, we feel like we can make a difference not only in our own lives, but in our families and in our community as well. So when we had been talking about this yoga and wine pairing, one thing that I did say to Mark was, well, let's do this in an intelligent way. So we'll talk about a dynamic yoga practice that is meant to open up and balance these energy centers, and then we'll explore a wine tasting, which then goes in a little deeper, and we talk about the qualities of each. So for instance, one of the things that he was passionate about doing was bringing a fortified wine in with the throat chakra. Fortified wines, if you've ever enjoyed them, Madeiras and ports and tawny ports, have a heating effect. But there's a way that there's a freedom. You can feel it physically in the body, even though we're talking about energy. And if you've ever had dinner with anyone, had gone out for a nice steak dinner, and then afterwards you're sharing a bottle of port, the words flow pretty easily.
And that is your throat chakra.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what Mark did was, and he was a very good quick study on understanding these energy centers, of which he hadn't heard of 6 months ago.
Oh, gosh.
But trying to find very dynamically, how do you take these wines and explore what the expression of the chakra energies were? Okay, so for instance, going back to our solar plexus, which is about fire and heat and metabolism and change. In your body on a physical level, when these energies are in balance, your digestive system works really well. You take food that you digest and you metabolize it pretty easily, and you're a healthy, strong person. So what he did was he chose a wine that was grown, the grapes themselves were grown in volcanic ash.
Wow.
And then what he did was he talked about the family's passion that owns the vineyard and what they put into understanding and growing and improving these wines over time. So it was a beautiful, beautiful pairing, which opened up an awful lot of dynamic discussion as to how do we take these esoteric pieces of yoga but then explore them on a very visceral, physical level. So it's a fantastic, fantastic experience.
That's a great example of how you can create collaboration in unconventional ways, which I love. I love that idea of finding someone who you can't imagine having that common ground with or that pairing with and pulling it together and making something so creative that benefits all involved.
Right.
So that does sound very interesting.
Right. Some of the other things that we have done at the studio are look into series that fulfill a community need. For instance, we run a yoga with cancer. So it was people that were undergoing cancer treatment that needed physical support, emotional support, and just a little bit of community, knowing that you're not alone. I've unfortunately been in a situation with a family member that was very close to me who went through a terrible experience with cancer treatment. And it affects the entire family. It's not just about the patient. So we've tried to do things like that. We've reached out to some of the local people that are working with addressing the opioid problems that we have right here. What we'd love to be considered as a bigger resource for the community.
Yeah.
And how do we reach out to the right partners so that we're offering services that are healing, that are nurturing, that are supportive, and foster a sense that we're all in this together, because ultimately we are.
Yeah. And I think that as society moves forward, that's where shopFranklin comes from, is trying to create that sense of community and responsibility to one another, because the more and more you understand it, and now scientific research is backing it, when you have that sense of community, things fall away. The anxiety, the depression, the stress. We are all living up here above what is. And as we come back to that place of center, that foundation, that root chakra, we can have that sense of belonging, that safety. And I love that you're working with the Safe Coalition on the opioid issue in Franklin, which is nationwide, but Franklin really has been affected. And it's something that I personally, it's the one exception that I make on shopFranklin, that if they're doing something, I'm telling you about it. Because it may not be about independent businesses, but it's about our community, and that's what we need to support. You also do Yoga Reaches Out. Now, this is not just Franklin Yoga and Wellness, it is lots of yoga at the same time.
It was started by Sarah Gardner, who was a local fitness instructor and yoga instructor in Wayland, Massachusetts. She had one of her children had spent way too much time in the neonatal unit at Children's Hospital, and she thought, I want to find a way to give back. So it started out as a very small grassroots organization and has grown to a much bigger event in 6 years. I believe that this year we had, on the big day, we raised money in order to participate, but on the big day, which was held all day at Gillette Stadium inside the field house, were 800 yogis practicing yoga. Each had raised at a minimum $250. So we've raised a lot of money in a very short amount of time, and these monies go back to helping people whose children are undergoing cancer treatment or cardiac treatment, or there's always a large outreach recipient, and there's always a smaller one. So we've also supported some of the smaller local initiatives, such as Ben Speaks, which is Judy's organization, which is reaching out to at-risk youth. Judy had lost her son, Ben, many years ago to suicide.
Okay.
So educating people and letting people know that there are resources available to them. This year, which was exciting, was a lot of the money from Yoga Reaches Out is actually going to support the Hale Center, which is a center that is run at Children's Hospital and is specifically for families of children who are undergoing cancer treatment. So it is supporting the parents who are there trying to hold their stuff together while they are wheeling a child in for treatment. So there are meditation services, there is Tai Chi, there are yoga classes, and they're really hoping to broaden what they do. Having an understanding that not only when someone is suffering and going through a major life change or an illness, everyone in their life is affected by it.
Absolutely.
Everyone in their life is hurting by it, and every person in that family needs to heal in their own unique way.
And a lot of times that becomes secondary. When you talk about an addiction situation, a lot of energy is spent on treating the addict or the patient. I can look back when my dad was terminally ill with cancer. We were all focused on him. And, I remember my mom fell to the wayside. And coming back and realizing her experience through all of this. And for me, it's in hindsight, but it really changed my look and had a profound effect on me and my desire to, again, create that sense of community, belonging, support, and knowing that you have everything you need to be okay.
Absolutely.
And that it's out there. So we are going to talk a little bit about yoga poses. So first off, behind me on this table, we have some props for yoga that literally prop you up. And this is what I use when I do yoga. So in order to take away some of that intimidation that someone might feel walking into a new space, let's talk about how, if someone wants to explore yoga, let's kind of break it down a little bit and say, all right, when you're walking in, step one, you have everything you need. There is nothing you need to know walking in the door. Carry that through you anywhere in life. You are enough. And you walk in, and someone will be there to help you.
You've got it. Namaste. Class over.
There you go. See? But some of the tools that people use in yoga. So when you go to a yoga class, no matter where you go, be it Franklin Yoga and Wellness or another studio, very often the first question is, do I bring a mat? So do I bring a mat?
Most yoga studios do have them either available for rent or you can borrow them. At our studio, you can borrow them. Just come on in.
Okay, so this green.
But with a yoga mat,
one
what I
rolled
will
up.
say,
Yeah.
what I will say about a yoga mat is, very quickly your yoga mat becomes a safe space for you. So if you have gone to maybe 3 yoga classes and you think this is a thing that I like, I suggest that you go online, you go to Target. I wouldn't buy the $10 cheapest mat because you'll slide around a little bit, but a $20 yoga mat is probably enough. But each time that you roll out the mat, there is an experience of opening up a space that's safe for you to explore. And sometimes what you'll need out of your yoga practice will be to sit still and maybe just sit and think or breathe or sometimes cry. And that's not a bad thing, because that space becomes very sacred to you. And you open up and you let go and you release and you find a way to build back up to a deeper, stronger, truer sense of where you should have been all along.
And that's a great vision of creating space. Very often we don't create space for ourselves in life at all.
Right.
And so if a yoga mat is that...
You can have this much space. That could be yours. You can carve that out in the world. Absolutely.
Space, especially as parents or employees or someone who's constantly doing. That's what yoga's about, is creating that space. So you can borrow one at most studios or rent one at most studios. They are cleaned in between each use. Or you can get an inexpensive yoga mat. There are a lot of non-independently owned businesses that sell them at a very reasonable price, or I'm sure you can work with a studio arrange to get one. But it's nice. I like the idea. It's almost like creating your own home in a space.
To come home.
To come home. So that is the mat. Now these come in handy also. We'll go through some simple yoga moves. I'm going to make you show me a move. Or we can do it right now. You want to do it right now?
Well, here's a simple move. Often,
what am I going to do with this?
Well, we'll use, sometimes we'll use a chair in yoga. And usually what we do is we start a yoga class by sitting down and taking a few moments just to ground. Because you want to take, again, an experience of walking outside of your regular day and coming within. Some people aren't comfortable sitting on the floor. So you bring the floor up to you so that you're aligned in the spine. You're sitting upright, shoulders are back, and now you've got some room to breathe. Because most of us habitually lean forward, hold our phone, type, talk, do whatever it is, have an ear cocked as we're holding the phone doing something. So this is not proper spinal alignment. And if we're talking about the energy centers aligning the spine, they're a little bit wonky when you're off center. So a very simple thing that we do with the blocks is literally just put our feet on them for a little stronger foundation.
That is a really good point. There's actually studies recently that in segments of the population, there's actually a deviation in the spine that is moving the head forward in alignment because of all of our electronics use.
It's called texting neck.
What's that?
Texting neck.
Texting neck. There you go.
It's chronic in every teenager in Franklin, Bellingham, and Redville.
Your head has a massive amount of weight, and you're actually physically created to hold it at a certain angle.
You
to
were perfectly
support.
created.
Yes.
To hold it
We
with the
are
natural
enough.
curves of the spine.
And we're seeing that issue with leaning forward. So I always tell my kids, like, shoulders back, chest out. I'm trying to focus on that. But yeah, absolutely, because you can come into a yoga practice.
Well,
and
your head weighs something like
40 pounds or something?
Yeah, somewhere.
Can't be 40
it's a
pounds.
heavy
It's a
amount.
heavy.
But when you lean it forward and you throw off your neck, you're changing and increasing the pressure at a much greater rate. So now you've got a 70-pound, in effect, head hanging out over your neck.
It's like walking around in 4-inch heels all day, but for your head.
Exactly.
Not very comfortable.
And why would we do that willingly?
Exactly. So the blocks are exactly that. They actually help you with also your flexibility. So if you're doing a pose, one pose that I've done in the studio that the blocks come in handy for me is, I believe it's a warrior, like a triangle where you go down, and I can't reach.
Right.
I'm long and lanky and not flexible. And so I'll put my hand on the block, and you can see me here. You can actually have the block this way or this way
Right.
for stability. And if you have limited flexibility, you can do it this way, so you have a longer reach, or this way. And also in, is it child's pose where your forehead's on the ground?
Yes.
So you lie on the ground, and you can put this under your forehead. So if your head isn't going straight to the bottom, or if that's uncomfortable to touch the mat, you can put that under your
Well, again,
forehead.
if you were lying on the floor with your arms in front of you, and your bottom was back by your feet, which are now underneath your bottom, and you're trying to get your forehead down to the ground, but your hips are tight, and that's not happening, there'd be a big gap between your forehead and the floor. So what most people will do is this, which is exactly what you were just saying, putting that forward moving weight. So now all you're doing is yanking on your cervical spine. But if you're placing the block underneath the forehead and here's the floor, you've supported this. So now the shoulders can relax, and the mid-back can relax, and the lower back can relax, and the pose actually has some comfort to it.
And I think this is actually a really good point to bring up. When you're in a yoga class, talk to the instructor before if you have any concerns, because then they'll look at you, you know, I have no shame. I'll walk in and say, I have no idea what I'm doing. And so that way, if I am struggling in a pose, if there's 15 people in the room, most yoga instructors are really good at noticing, but if they already know that you might need a little introduction into a pose, or that you have shoulder issues, that's a huge thing, shoulder issues, that you can't do certain movements, they'll come over and bring you a block or show you the correct way to use a block right in the middle of the class, to make sure that you're doing it properly. So walk in, be okay knowing that not everyone has all the information, and ask for help. All of us have to ask for help in many different areas of our life. Yoga should be a safe one to do.
Well, I think it's also important that people do, even if you're pulling the instructor aside outside of the studio, just to let them know, I do have a chronic issue. Oftentimes people don't want to share their stuff in front of a room full of strangers, and that's certainly respectable. But especially if you are expecting a baby, please pull that instructor aside. In general, a yoga practice is not going to harm a fetus. However, there are certain things that we do in general that we wouldn't do if someone was expecting a baby. For instance, when you're carrying a child, you are a continual lifeline to this baby. You breathe, the baby breathes. Your blood flows, the baby's blood flows. If you're holding your breath, you have a growing fetus who now all of a sudden has lost the capability to breathe. So that's important, not to hold the breath. But there's very simple, subtle things that any good qualified instructor should be able to guide you through safely through the practice.
Good to know.
Also, if you are coming off of surgery, I love when you sit at the beginning of class and ask people if they have any type of injury, and they say, oh, no. No one raises their hands. Like, are you sure? I'm pretty sure out of 20 people, somebody has something going on. No, nothing. But at the end of class, they'll say, oh, I really like that, but this was a little tight because I had a hip replacement 3 weeks ago. Well, first of all, 3 weeks ago, maybe you shouldn't be in class just yet. But the instructor should be able to give you some sort of modification, whether it's using a prop or whether it's just sometimes holding back from the pose and not going quite as deep.
And that's okay. One thing I think that you should never do in yoga is look at the person next to you. You can look at them and say hi and introduce yourself, create that community. But very often, I have the flexibility of a 2x4. And I sat next to a woman who I did not know was in training to be a yoga instructor. And she was sitting there doing bends. Her legs, she was like touching either wall. And here I am, I can't touch my shins. And it really gives you a feeling of, oh, but, you know, where am I? And just like that, I didn't know she was training to be a yoga instructor. So clearly she has her own experience that she's having, and I need to stay in my experience and seek out help to make sure I'm doing it properly, but do it to the end that I am able. And yoga is a great practice to do that in. Do it to the end that you're able. So if someone's introducing themselves to yoga, is there a intro yoga class so that they're more comfortable coming into the moves? You know, downward dog. A lot of people know downward dog, and there's a right way of doing it that you learn in the class. But what might be the best class? A gentle yoga, a yoga for beginners? Is that where you should start? I would suggest
newer students that you should scan. If you're attending a yoga studio, you should go onto their website, look at the schedule that's coming up for the week, and look for anything that uses these words: gentle, beginner, basics, or mindful. Because those will be a slower paced class where you will not be rapidly driving yourself through poses and looking around the room, cranking your neck to try to figure out what's happening around you. A gentle class should just move at a slower pace. It will be the same poses that you're doing in a more dynamic yoga class, but you'll be taking more time to set them up a little more safely. You'll be taking more time to get the understanding and the basics of how to breathe properly. We do use different breathing techniques and different styles and different practices of yoga. And it will give you a chance to become familiar with the language. For instance, Sarah, if you and I decided that we were going to sign up for a ballet class this afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she smiles at just the thought of it. But if we had gone into a point class, we wouldn't know the language that they were speaking, we wouldn't know the moves that they were cueing, and we certainly wouldn't be able to follow the combination, besides the fact of the thought of us in point shoes.
I could totally do it.
Well, you're one up on me, sister.
I am 1 point above you.
There you go.
Not so much.
But if the two of us had signed up for a basic ballet class, we'd become familiar with the structure of the class. We would become familiar with the way and the why we warm up the way that we do. And then we'd be able to build from that. Mm-hmm. So a gentle yoga class, I feel, is a wonderful way to start to introduce someone to the practice. You will have people that come in that have been moving their bodies pretty confidently through whatever they do, CrossFit or Zumba class or whatever, who come in and go, I don't like the pace of this. I'd like to know a little more quickly, and I will move forward pretty rapidly. Go for it. I'm not going to hold you back. Mm-hmm. But I think a gentle or a beginner class gives you a little bit of comfort, so then you go, okay, here's where I'm at. Sometimes also I will find that people expect that they need a more dynamic experience. They come into yoga class, sit down, take a few moments, and then they go, wow, my lower back is much more problematic than I'd normally like to accept. Mm-hmm. So sitting quietly and trying to learn how to breathe deeper into the body, trying to move more intelligently through the body, working with functional movements, so basically that's the way the body's meant to move. For instance, if you're taking a seated forward fold, the body normally hinges so that the torso would roll forward. But if you have an unhappy, achy back, and you tend to come into a forward fold like this, something gets lost in the process. So a gentle class will bring you back to the basics, give you an awful lot of knowledge about yourself, and then help you decide where you're going to go from there.
Well, why don't we do something to transition us into yoga world?
Okay.
You mentioned maybe we can do some breathing exercises.
Sure.
And this is something that I think is really important, because if you speak to anyone when it comes to energy and yoga, it comes down to the breath. Mm-hmm. The breath is your life force. You need to breathe. How you breathe, mindful breathing, all of those ways that you're feeding your soul and your body. So why don't we do some breathing exercises, so when you go to your first beginner's yoga and gentle yoga, you've got the breathing
You're ready
down.
to go.
You're all set.
You're ready to go.
Not that you needed it. All right.
Well, one thing that I remind students of is the breath is the way to help you quiet down the mind so that you have a venue to come back into your body. Because most of us move through our lives fairly mindlessly, rushing from one thing to the next. You're a busy mom. And we know each other. So I know how busy your day goes. And you do move from one thing to the next. And too many people, I feel, eat standing up. Why not sit down and take the time to enjoy the meal that you've taken the time to prepare, so that you're tasting it, you're smelling it, it's nourishing you, and you're having an experience with your family.
With my chicken nuggets.
Exactly. You're going to bite those chicken nuggets slowly,
Love
mindfully,
chicken nuggets.
bite and enjoy every single experience of it. But what the breath does, I believe, is it anchors us to slow us down enough that then we become much more aware of how we're feeling, so that we can listen to our belly and say, am I really hungry? Or do I see chocolate and I know where my stash is, and I'm just going to go for that because that's a quicker fix. But I think the breathing gets you to slow down and go, you know what? I think I can hold off on that just a little bit longer, and maybe what I really need is something more nutritious for the moment.
And this is something that you can do anywhere, which I think is important. So, moms of young children who relax while their kid's napping in the backseat of the car, and they don't take them out of the car because they finally fell asleep. Instead of browsing your phone, actually sit and do a breathing exercise. Or on the commuter rail going into the city. I'm sure everyone's on their computer, on their phone. Not many people read the paper anymore.
Right.
Actually sit and be mindful. Even if you're not breathing, sit with good posture, look out the window, and actually observe and be aware of what you're driving through.
Right.
I do this exercise on the commuter rail through Franklin, and I've lived in Franklin for 11 years, and what you see is really, really interesting. You go, wow, I didn't know that was there.
As opposed to what you normally miss.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. There's so much that we miss in the task of going. And we're never being. So let this breath bring you back into being.
And when you're on your phone, you're constantly connected, you are being pulled outside of yourself always. When you're sitting quietly and closing your eyes, you're coming within and listening. And that's a big piece of what healing is understanding what you really need. So the easiest way to breathe, to center, is to close your eyes.
We can't see what everyone else is seeing, so all right, my eyes are closed.
I can see what she's seeing, though.
All right.
So I usually work with people and getting them to center for a few moments. So each time that you come into your yoga class, we take a moment just simply to arrive. And metaphorically, what you're doing is coming from your outside world into this inside world. Maybe the mat is the metaphor where you sit. You give yourself a few moments just to sit and get comfortable and centered and grounded. And just breathe. And normally what you'll find is if you've got 10, 20 people sitting on yoga mats getting excited the class is going to start, and they've gotten to know each other over the years, there's a lot of chatting, there's a lot of interaction, people are asking each other how their lives are going, but when they quietly sit and breathe, the energy of the room just simply settles down. And there's a peacefulness that very quickly comes over, right? You come within, you bring it down. So whatever else is going on, the laundry that's still sitting on the counter, goes away, even if it's for 75 minutes. For 75 minutes, it's not pulling at you. Okay? So go ahead and close your eyes.
Okay.
I'm going to have you take a deep, full breath. Completely fill up your lungs, fill up your chest, fill up your ribs, and open your mouth and exhale. And here we go. It's a very easy breath. We'll breathe in for the count of 4, 3, 2, 1, and you hold it now inside the body for an 8 count. So we're at about 5, 4, 3, 2, and now you begin a slow exhale for the count of 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We breathe in for 4, and then you hold. And the holding's important because it starts to stir up whatever might be stagnant inside of the body. And you'll start to let it go at 2, 1, all the way through an open mouth for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And now it feels good to breathe in deeply for 4 because we've cleaned out whatever was stagnant. And then we hold it and we again let the energy just start to build up a little bit. What's stagnant starts to move around and shift. And then when we're almost there, as we open the mouth and exhale deeply, we start to get whatever's stagnant at the bottom in the lungs and push it all the way out. So when you finish that one at 8, you go ahead and breathe in one more time for 4. And then you'll hold it one more time for 7, getting this idea of cleaning house. And then open the mouth slow and deep for 8, getting to the very bottom of the breath. Eventually sealing the lips, opening the eyes, and just going back to your normal breathing. And something as simple as that, 4 rounds, twice a day, starts to bring in a much quieter experience. Now I would take that breathing exercise, the numbers were 4, 7, 8, and start to build on it so that maybe you build up to 8 times a day, 2 times a day, 8 rounds each. And the change that can happen within a month's time in your life is incredible.
Can you tell that I'm all like zoned out right now? That was lovely.
There you go.
So that will be the challenge for those watching today. And
see
for
where
me.
she is in a month.
So 4, 7, 8. Everyone watching, turn off your television, your DVR, your phone, set it aside, and twice a day, 4, 7, 8, 4 cycles, just sit and breathe. And I think that that really will make a profound difference. It may sound crazy, but it's kind of hard to stop and look inside.
It is.
So
you can schedule it on your phone.
Yes, you can use your phone to schedule it.
You can do it first thing in the morning as you sit up, but you're not ready to get out of bed. I suggest that you do that before you've greeted your family for the day, because something always happens. Some child always spills something, and it kind of messes up the whole round.
Yeah,
and then
or can't find their shoe that's on the floor in front of them or on their foot.
Yep, sometimes to do it, the best time to do is right before you go to bed, or as a busy mom, when everyone's left the table and you're trying to get the energy to clean up the kitchen, which most of us usually start that task with a You might as well do a breathing exercise anyways.
A 4, 7, 8 proper breathing exercise to recenter and do it mindfully.
Absolutely. But simple things can happen when you just simply focus on the breath. One thing that I would suggest is that most people, when they're sitting in traffic, is that you just slow down and breathe. You huffing and puffing and swearing is not going to get the traffic light to change or the person in front of you who's broken down to move. But you bringing yourself to a calmer place will help you. By the time you've got to get out and go knock on that door and say, hey, buddy, what's going on? You're calm, you're centered, you're focused, and you could be of greater service by being able to help that person rather than tearing their head off.
I agree.
Yeah.
Betsy, thank you so much for agreeing to come on Shop Franklin Supporting Small Business with me. I'm so glad that you were here. I feel more zen. And as you close every yoga class,
we traditionally finish by a simple greeting where we place our hands together with the thumbs at your heart center. Close your eyes, take a deep breath in and out. The light and the brightness which resides within me honors and celebrates the light and the brightness which resides within you. Namaste.
Namaste.
This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors, good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV. And thanks for watching.